Good evening and welcome to Wesley Guild SA. And I would like to welcome you to today's session. Today we are talking about CODESA. For those who don't know what CODESA is the Convention for a Democratic South Africa. These are negotiations that were held to end apartheid in South Africa. Talking to us about this is none other than General Mr. Bantu Holomisa. He is the co-founder of the United Democratic Movement, which is known as the UDM, and it was founded on the 27th of September 1997, and he serves as its elected president and is currently a member of parliament representing the UDM, which in 2017 celebrated its 20th year of anniversary. He was the commander of Transkei Defence Force and head of the Transkei Government Independent Homeland between 1987 and 1994, up to the first national elections. Under his belt, he has done quite a couple of remarkable things, including being the ANC election committee. He was chosen to campaign nationwide alongside Mr. Thabo Mbeki, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, Mrs. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, as well as the late Nelson Mandela. We will continue with his biography. It is quite a long one, but before we get into everything, can I ask Rev Stemela to pray for us, and we will get into the gist of things.
Are Rappeling, come let us pray. Heavenly God, our parent, Jesus Christ, our friend, and Holy Spirit, our comforter. We thank you for the opportunity as young people to come once again in this platform, Wesley Guild SA, to come and discuss izinto ezasifikelela kwinkululeko yelizwe laseMzantsi Afrika. We pray for your wisdom to be upon him during this time, as we engage during this evening on this very important milestone of our country. We still have got challenges, but we're looking forward to this conversation and engage in looking into what CODESA has done and can continue to do is implemented. Bless you, General Ngalumzuzu, kasingana kule nkonzo, usikhokele Nkosi ke kule nto ethwano, ukuze Nkosi inceba yakho ibe phezu kwethu ngalonke ixesha. Singxolise kalibitso lele mahla lantathe lelamura lelamoya ohalalelana. Amen.
Amen. Amen. So between 1988 and 1989, the government led by Mr. Holomisa unbanned approximately 33 organizations that were banned by his predecessors. His government worked closely with the liberation movement, and as a result, Transkei had a smooth transition prior to the 1994 national elections. Mr. Holomisa also led Transkei delegations to Convention for a Democratic South Africa, which is the CODESA negotiations. In 1996, he was expelled from the ANC after testifying to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission about issues and activities concerning the Transkei. He refused to retract his testimony, arguing that what he had stated was his historical knowledge to all concerned. He served as the Deputy Minister of Environmental and Tourism of South Africa in the Government of National Unity. Mr. Holomisa continued playing a leading role in promoting ethics of good governance and has exposed alleged corruption with the government employees' pension fund investment in the Public Investment Corporation. He consistently called on President Ramaphosa to act and put an end. It led to the institution of Commission of Inquiry into allegations for impropriety regarding the Public Investment Corporation, the Mpati Commission. He's an athlete who has played rugby, soccer, and tennis, and was vice captain to the parliamentary rugby squad from 1994 to 1996. He keeps fit with the occasional game of golf. As soon as a sports fan in general, he is also a Kaizer Chiefs football supporter and has attended all Rugby World Cup final matches since 1995, with the latest in 2019 in Japan, where he witnessed Springbok captain Siya Kolisi and his team hold the Webb Ellis Trophy high. that is quite a biography. It is quite a remarkable biography, and it's not even all of it. This is just the gist of it. So as you know, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it on the comments section below. If you have anything that you would like to say and anything that you would like to bring forth for us to talk about, and we will gladly forward it to Mr. Holomisa. So that is it. Sit back, relax, interact, and let's have yet another fruitful session. Over to you, Mr. Holomisa.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Are you able to hear me? Can
Yes,
you
I
hear
am.
me?
Yes, we can.
Firstly, I would like to thank the team and committee which took a decision to invite me to come and share some thoughts with you this evening. I'm not going to be too long. I would like us to turn this into a discussion rather than a lecture. Yes, I confirm that I was once a head of Transkei government. I was once a head of government. And I also participated in the process which led to the elections in 1994 in this country. But just before we talk about CODESA, allow me to give you a short history of South Africa. There has been a conflict in this country between black and white, where the whites were calling the shots without consulting the blacks. And as a result, the blacks decided to resist this oppression. This resistance led to the establishment of a military wing of the ANC called Umkhonto weSizwe in early 60s. That conflict continued, but up until 1985, 86, where in 1985, President Gorbachev of Russia and President Reagan of USA met in Geneva and decided that the Cold War must be a thing of the past. Cold War, where you had the Western world supporting certain countries, or in Africa, and if in South Africa, for practical purposes, Russia was seen to be backing the liberation movement, whilst the Western world was in favor of apartheid regime. But that conflict, that decision where they took in Geneva to say, let the Cold War be a thing of the past, led to the independence of Namibia in 1991. I still remember the United Nations resolution which was taken to make sure that UN get its independence. Mr. Atisari was appointed to represent the UN, while Chester Crocker, the Assistant Secretary of African Affairs in USA administration, was representing US. That process culminated in Namibia getting their own independence. But at the same time, or even before, during this period, you will recall that in Angola, the military camps of Umkhonto weSizwe in Angola, they were fighting alongside with the forces of liberation in Angola, and USA was supporting another crew of who was resisting the so-called Russian influence or communist influence. Having said that, the decision by these two countries, Russia and USA, led to Angola being told that Cubans must get out of Angola, South Africa must get out of Angola, and that Umkhonto weSizwe must relocate from Angola to elsewhere in Africa. So they went to Uganda, and their military bases were established, were sent back to Uganda. And of course, their head office was, I think, in Lusaka. So fast forward, this then created an atmosphere of hope that if Namibia is going to be given a freedom, so also is also going to come to us. There were parallel incidents which were taking place at this time. The ANC and the National Party government were holding secret meetings with a view to find a solution to the problem of South Africa. That process culminated in the unbanning of the ANC in 1990 and also release of political prisoners. One thing which we must now understand is that in the conflict of South Africa, militarily speaking, that is between white and blacks, there were no winners. Mr. Mandela and ANC and the National Party of de Klerk decided to sit down and find a solution around the table. That process led to the establishment of CODESA, a Convention for Democratic South Africa. So in that period, the Black political parties who think alike establish what I would call a front in Durban, where we took a decision that the Constitution of South Africa must be drawn by a constituent assembly or by an elected body. Whilst de Klerk thought that he is just going to continue with this type of tricameral approach where the National Party accommodated the certain populations, but not giving them full rights. So we met, and then we demanded, or rather the Patriotic Front resolved that in order for us to participate, we would need an interim government, and that there has to be a transitional government during the period until the next elections. And that interim government must be responsible for drawing the constitution and so on and so on. Indeed, in 1991, the first CODESA meeting took place, and there were resolutions which were taken there that South Africa would need a constitution, and that the Black South Africans for the first time would be given a right to vote, and that decisions would be taken by 2/3 majority, and so on and so on and so on. And then fast forward to 1992, CODESA was continuing even at that stage still. But the bone of contention now was about the unbanning of, about the suspension of the armed struggle by the military wings of the liberation movements. Obviously, the de Klerks, we had to come up with something as well on our side. we said, well, the airwaves must be freed. That is, SABC propaganda must be stopped now, and that SABC must reflect this new arrangement in South Africa. Well, de Klerk tried his luck and attacked the ANC at CODESA, but Madiba stood up later on and put him in his place. Unfortunately, the issue of CODESA could not be finished as the way we thought it would be. Because in 1993, the assassination of Chris Hani raised the tempers amongst the people of South Africa. And by the time we resumed talks with the de Klerk's government, we were now saying we need to go and demand a date. But what I like about CODESA is that the things which we didn't finalize to negotiate during that period were pended and shoved into the constitution. The constitution of this country, if it was implemented properly, the poverty and the sufferings you are seeing today would have not been there, because there are certain articles and clauses of the constitution which are clear about the human rights issues, the access to a number of things, water, electricity, is written there. And also even the economic empowerment is also provided in the constitution. But unfortunately, it would appear that after 1994, after the elections, the struggle or the original agenda was set aside or was hijacked by a criminal element within the ruling party, whose aim was to line their pockets. Hence today, we are embarrassed by corruption, where even people would steal the money destined for funerals and for the poor people to be treated. People are not ashamed to build shoddy, to come up with shoddy buildings when they won tenders. So in conclusion, I would say we did well in terms of managing the transition from 1990 up to 1994. And unfortunately, the ruling party monopolized the issue of appointing people with competence, even if they are outside their party. Hence, we find ourselves in this mess. Let's discuss Magestete. Ivulile gintlanga. Goes.
With regards to these talks, you touched a bit about where we are now as a country, but would you say the agreements that were reached during these talks are still being upheld currently?
Well, those agreements, 99% of them were replaced by the constitution. Those agreements were, you remember, there was even an agreement that there should be a of national unity. Those things are things of the past. The 1994 election was a watershed in this country. Hence, we had a black president and the cabinet. And years later, we hold our elections. And the people who win elections, then they go and implement whatever they promised. So the agreements, I would say, let me maybe go back a little bit. Whilst we were negotiating, the Secretary General of SACP in 1993, especially after the death of Chris Hani, Mr. Joe Slovo, he suggested that let's go through a sunset clause, sunset clauses. That means, in a nutshell, you compromise. That is, you are not going to get everything you want. One of those compromises was to allow, for instance, the IFP, who was insisting that South Africa should be a federal republic. But we had to compromise on that, and hence you have provinces today. One of the compromises also was on the issue of land and the economy. It was not touched at all in detail. But the Constitution allows us to review such sunset clauses. They are not cast in stone, in other words.
Okay, and would you say it's a good thing that we have a constitution, or are there certain agreements or clauses that personally you would like to implement now, or you think that as a country moving into a democratic South Africa, we should have carried those with us?
Well, I think we have not done a good job since 1994, that of sitting down and review the road we have traveled. I don't think the issue of provinces is a good idea. These are just glorified homelands, and they are a waste. I would rather see that the national government should focus mainly on local government. Train people there, make sure that the infrastructure is developed in that area. Keep it lean, because these provincial governments, although the Constitution says they can make laws, I'm still yet to see a legislation they have drafted since 1994. So it's a waste. The other issue is now should be on the issue of economic empowerment. Constitution is talking about empowering the people of South Africa. When the Afrikaners were poor, they didn't hesitate to set aside special funds which would deal with their poor situation. Here at home, you cannot expect that the people of this country, the majority citizens, and I would say the majority citizen will be in the region of 54 million out of 57, 58 million. You expect the Black South Africans, who are 53 million, to every day go out and look for jobs in companies which are managed or owned by mere 2.5 million white population. That's not on. So we need, therefore, to invest into our own people. We need to establish a national fund or sector banks, like those who want to invest on textile, take those youth people to get capital from that. Those who want to be in this IT sector, there is a sector bank for that. Those who would like to be in the agriculture, you have the same. Construction. So the money is there, but because we are not using it properly, there are other people who are wise, and they came outside and chow the money.
Luyanda Akonachek asks do you think that the ANC still holds the values of Marxism?
Wow. Even the so-called communists in this country. About plate laba. Our jungle lifestyle, Abagut is a communist person, this one. Okanye emsebenzini pha in the department. Unehow is up in arms, but that department is headed by a communist. I sabrenda kudala le into. And saboni kwa sign yoba kukhona nenye iMaxis Squares yasasizazi. Hamba uye kwezi golf estate apho bahlala khona ubone ukuthi awu cha adla kahle la madoda la.
So would you say that now it's a matter of each to its own? People are working towards the betterment of their pockets rather than of the country or of the people?
We must give a credit where it is due. I think we are still, as compared to other countries, having a good social security. I'm talking here now about the grants to which are acting as a way of alleviating poverty in many homes. The ANC government in 1994, 95, under Kada Asmal and Castles, they roll out water programs. But those, unfortunately, that infrastructure has collapsed because it's not maintained. A lot of homes now have got electricity. We are speaking freely. We are not afraid that if tomorrow my house will be surrounded by police. There are things which we can say, on this one we give plus. But there's a lot of work which still needs to be done, especially that of empowering the people of South Africa. And you see this culture of parents saying, my child must go and work after I graduate. We need to change that completely and say, you have studied along the following lines. You need to follow your career. I want to start my business. Where are the tools? The state must give you tools. The infrastructure. Look at the many schools now in the Eastern Cape, in Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal, and so on in the rural areas. Those kids could not study properly during this COVID-19 because the infrastructure in their school is zero. We've been hearing a noise here that the broadband is going to be rolled out to the rural areas, to the schools, so that the kids there can have access to internet freely. But they are dragging their feet. So I would say, therefore, there are things which we can say, yeah, we have done well. Here we are still failing.
Just a follow up on what you just said now regarding broadband and children in rural areas having access to unlimited internet. Do you think at this point internet would be a priority, considering that there are children in those very same provinces who do not have classrooms and are still learning under trees, and toilets have worms in them? There are so many basic utilities that need to be sorted for them. Do you think we are maybe jumping ahead of ourselves by gunning for internet before we even fix the very basics?
The broadbands to help the kids to number of schools is part of a broader infrastructure development. If you build a school, at least it must have laboratories, it must have all the the equipment for having access to internet, like the broadband. So we must build these schools and say this is a completed work. So you don't have to leave the other. Yes, there are schools which have been built already, but they don't have this infrastructure I'm talking about. So it's a package.
Got you. I've got a question here from Mil Nazembe, who says, you mentioned that one of the major demands going to the discussions was the release of the political prisoners. There are organizations that are still trying to get their members out of custody. Was this agreement for the ANC only?
No, there were other political parties which were released. But I think if there are still political parties, I mean, there are still political detainees, if I hear you correctly. That means that political party is not using the constitution of this country. We have courts now, we have got media, we've got social media. So I would suggest that, and there's also parliament, they should use those forums, but I doubt very much. If they are, as I suggest, they must go and follow those channels.
Okay. Siyabulela Tonono asks, what was the relationship between the ANC's People War strategy of the 1980s and the CODESA process?
What was
the relationship between the ANC's People's War strategy of the 1980s and the CODESA process?
Well, that strategy you are referring to was overtaken by events, and I've said earlier on when I was opening this that the summit between President Gorbachev of Russia and Reagan of USA in 1985 in Geneva changed the complex altogether, and people opted to sit down around the table. We saw that in Angola when Cubans were told, go back home. South Africa, go back home. This Angola doesn't belong to you. Don't even stop in Namibia where they were in control of. They were told to drive back to Pretoria. MK was told in Angola by Russia and USA, go to Uganda. And what followed after was the independence of Namibia, which was reached around people sitting around the table. We were the next one. I remember 1991, Madiba was released on February, né? In February. He was released in February, and then by March 21st, he phoned me, he says, Bantu, kuzawufuneka undikhaphe siye Namibia siyovuyela independence yaseNamibia, Namibians. So we went there. When we arrived there, we, of course, Madiba, we are magnet, we mine a magnet. So after a stadiums, Pumile, Zange leaders ezininzi lunching. They followed us to where we were staying. I'm talking about James Baker, who was the Secretary of State, was a USA. I'm talking about Shabanesky, who was the Secretary of State or Minister of Foreign Affairs in Russia. Ikakhulu kubo babe more interested ukuthi now he is released. What is the way forward? What is he suggesting? And then there are other leaders also from the continent and other countries who also wanted to know Madiba ukuthi what is the program going forward? But Madiba said the solution of South Africa is not going to be solved through arms. We have no appetite for that. South African and ANC and National Party had already started the talks, which led to his release anyway. It's very man,
It's very good. You share very fond memories of the late Dr. Nelson Mandela. Would you say he was one of the people that pushed you in being quite persistent and an active part of the CODESA talks?
We pushed who?
Would you say he pushed you? He was one of the pushing reasons that made you be so consistent, so persistent, and so active in the CODESA talks?
You're referring to me?
Yes, I'm referring to you saying you share quite fond memories with Dr.
Oh,
Nelson Mandela. So the relationship that you had with him, did that also push you?
no, the history of Holomisa started politically when I became a head of Transkei government in 1987. And early 1988, we established ties with the ANC and PAC in exile. We sent delegations after we removed the government of Stau and the Matanzimas. The delegation to Tanzania to talk to PAC, it was led by General Titi Matanzima and Brigadier Keswa, and then we sent Colonel Mkalali to meet OR Tambo, ANC in Lusaka. The rest is history. And then I also authorized the request by the commander of the Transkei Defense Force, General Matanzima, after he received a request from the ANC in exile to say, please, man, accommodate us in Transkei in terms of training, and also we would like you, Transkei Defense Force, to send your military instructors to come and train Umkhonto weSizwe on conventional warfare in Uganda. That operation was led by General Mandela. He was a major then. Successful operations went smoothly. So by the time Madiba ephuma ke na ke ngokusele sayisadibana kakuhle sathetha language enye nomuntu omdala, because ikakhulu I was more like ngutata because I was too young at that stage. Nento kumane kubizwana comrade Madiba, comrade Mandela, ayingeni kakuhle lento. Ngidala lo muntu comrade kanjani lo, but ke language yapha komkhulu la. So ifundile kuye, ufundile nalapha kum. Ikhumla simfundisa even no matcha okupha e-stadium eMthatha xa bezawunikezwa kuba ngaba mhlawumbe njengoba usiya kwezi-states nje, we noticed into yoba uyume xa u-inspect guard of honor ufuna ubulisa wonke la majoni. No, nekuhambe straight ujonge nje ngelihlo lase-left umane uthi ngentloko. uMadiba ayingumuntu othanda ufuna uma abambe isandla. Sasimtitsha nezo zinto kapha eMthatha e-stadium emajonini.
Lebogang Madibo, ask a question. Dr. Holomisa, was there a pressing need for us to have agreed on sunset clauses? What prevented the CODESA negotiations to have conclusive agreements on land ownership and also economic emancipation of Black people?
Yonke loo nto, everything you are raising is accommodated in the Constitution. But at that stage, I told you that there was no time, especially after the assassination of Crisani. The whole thing was not finalized. Talk about land, talk about economic emancipation, but the issue of land was part of that sunset clause which Joe Slovo prepared, land and properties. We said, okay, we are not going to waste our time on this one now. Let's get a date because this thing is going to get out of hand. You must also remember that almost everybody had come back inside the country. Members of Umkhonto weSizwe, APLA, and many others were already inside the country. We could see that de Klerk was negotiating in bad faith. Firstly, he unleashed the so-called black-on-black violence in 1990 in order to render the leadership of the liberation movement useless because they came back and they didn't have military camps inside South Africa. That is one of the disadvantages which we experience because our freedom was different from the Angolans, from Zimbabweans. Zimbabweans had liberated zones where they would say, this is our zone. Both APLA and ANC both MK and APLA or ANC and PAC, I can challenge them now to raise their hand and say, show us which land did you liberate? You would say, this is a liberated zone. Nothing. They came back from exile without carrying even pistols, let alone the trucks and their guns, which they were using then. So they had to choose between whether to stick on negotiations or go back and fight. But I take my hat off to the leadership which was negotiating then, because if you look at our constitution, those issues we could not finalize then are contained there. ANC at one stage even had a 2/3 majority. They could have thrown away those sunset clauses and helped the people. But unfortunately, it looks like their priority has been to line their pockets and their families.
Mtibani Sipiliso says, you speak of compromises that were made in the discussions of the new reformed South Africa. And yet one of the fundamental rights that led us into the struggle was that of land. And yet it was not discussed. My question would be, then what becomes our point of departure when wanting to revisit this policy besides the Constitution? Where does one start in ensuring that these discussions are started and are legislated? So the process going into Parliament, because this is an issue of high urgency.
The Constitution allows South Africans to discuss this issue, and already there have been processes which have been started to consult South Africans and on how to move forward on the issue of the land. It's a pity that this coronavirus has delayed things, because by this time, there should have been a draft legislation being debated in this country. But I think it's gonna need a political will on the part of those who are in charge of the country. If they drag feet, the people are going to be frustrated. For instance, the UDM was saying, why do you only focus on the issue of land only from 1910 up to now? What about the land which was taken long before that? Because 60% of the land, if we start in 1910, that would mean that lucrative and rich and fertile land, we will miss it. But let's see, the process is in Parliament. Let South Africans discuss and find a solution for a way forward.
Uzonke Sodawa says, would you say, given the state of our country and the inequities created by the CODESA compromises, it's now time to review the agreement?
Come again? It's not?
She says, would you say, given the state of our country and the inequities created by the CODESA compromises, it's now time to review the agreement?
It's time to review the agreement, but I think most of the things, when people were given to vote, as I said earlier on, at one stage, ANC was given a 2/3 majority. They didn't do that. Right now, you will still see the Constitution calls that decisions must be taken by 2/3 majority. Yes, I fully agree. I've been saying so many a times to say, let us review the road we have traveled since 1994 and try and find out if there are any inherent defects with a view to solve them. I fully agree with that position. And also when we meet next time, we need to have time frames. And a government which doesn't implement those time frames or follow that program, it should be removed. I've been behind the quick grant for tell them now nonsense like.
Ratile asks, where can one find a document that comprehensively outlines the sunset clauses? So is there a place where we can find this document and go through it?
I'm not sure, but I think the ANC archives or Secretary General should share that as to what exactly did you allow or did you compromise on. Equally so, de Klerk is still around, but the truth of the matter is that there were no winners in the conflict of South Africa, militarily speaking. If we had conquered at least even one province, we would have perhaps got something better. But unfortunately, the comrades who claimed to have fought for us came back carrying their briefcases, not even a pistol inside those briefcases.
I've got a question from Tibanisi again, who says, which ideology do you use as a tool of analysis? I'm asking this, linking it to the land issue, because you have been a member of parliament yourself. Have there been any means of trying to ensure that umhlaba ubuyela ebantwini wabo? If not, should we not then change our tools of analysis?
The UDM, ANC, and EFF are the only parties which said the land must be given back without compensation. Full stop. Next question.
Okay. This is a comment more than a question from Peladi Zondi, who says, you have studied along the lines, the government should give you tools along side those lines. So she quotes you and says, that's a good one. A question from me is more about the current state of the country, particularly issues surrounding land, surrounding inequality, surrounding empowerment, not just entrepreneurial empowerment, but access to education. There are just a number of things that we are currently facing as a country. How would you advise a young person watching this now to take a stand and join in making a difference and in fighting and in changing how things currently are at the moment?
I think, firstly, the youth of South Africa after 1994 tended to relax. That also includes the civil society in this country. And the government was given a carte blanche to do as they please. What we need to do now is for the youth of South Africa demand some of the issues I've suggested. That we cannot wait to be employees perpetually. We want to be wealth creators so that we can employ our brothers and sisters. In doing so, we want the government to arrange that we have access to capital and also to make sure that we are capacitated in different industries. We have bilateral agreements with many countries. Those countries are ready to offer training to our youth for free. But there is no political will, or the administration is manned by incompetent people. It's the same youth which has got degrees today. What I would suggest, if I was in government, I would say, who are likely to be future director generals, chief directors, and so on? Why can't we take these kids who have got degrees and expertise, and we start training those? The same thing in the military. Military is getting old. It has aged. We need to rejuvenate that military and the police. So other youth members would go to parliament. Look at the EFF, that's youth. So all you need to do now is to say, what role must I play? Not what Holomisa is telling me, which one must I do? So the opportunities are there. But as I say, let Cyril Ramaphosa, because he's still in charge for now, just help create a national fund to help the youth of South Africa. Those who want to specialize on building the economy, they must be helped.
That is a very valid point. I think as a young person of this country, one of a misperception is that we are relaxed, and that is not really the case. I think what works against us is the fact that majority of the people sitting in our parliament are actually of a pensioner's age, and it has become such a norm over the years to have old people leading the country, and it poses as a challenge for young people to even try and get into that space, because already it is filled with old people who are over 60 and ideally should be pension, retired, and hand over the ropes to young and emerging people. So that's just a perception we carry in this country, that it might not be a true reflection.
It's not a perception, it's a fact.
It's a reality.
Reality. We have young people, old people who have looked at the current setup. The youth is coming back in big numbers, but you will still need a little bit of experience to guide the new members, especially the young ones, because if there will be disadvantage for others, where you come straight from university, straight to parliament, you have never been to a government department, you have never run a business, you don't own a property. So you need a nice mixture there to teach each other. So when you are passing a baton, you don't run away and say, you will find the baton lying there. You wait for someone to come and say, take the baton, run with it. And I think the parties in parliament are beginning to create a space for the young people. But we cannot all be members of parliament. Some young people must work, be wealth creators, so that you create wealth and employ your children and other children in future. Unfortunately, we have been consuming too much since 1994, but that cake has shrunk now. And I shudder to what would happen if one day, I shudder to think what would happen one day when the government says they have no money to pay grants. So we have to invest in our youth now.
As we're about to wrap up, we have local government elections coming up next year. And please, can you give us just a summary of your manifesto for these upcoming elections? What is your manifesto? What are your plans?
The issue of manifestos are still yet to be published, but speaking from experience, we must try this time around to try to depoliticize local government. Yes, we will go there and campaign, but when the people are in the council, they must, first of all, think about the people they represent. If you talk about budget, think about the needs which are affecting, the needs which are needed by our people in the communities. But key to that, we are going to need a little bit of a paradigm shift this time around. You need to make sure that The councillor who is going to represent you must promote ethics of good governance. A councillor who is going to delve his nose into the affairs of allocating tenders, that should be left entirely to the accounting officers. Also, the infrastructure development, which is going to be rolled out, we have to call on the national government and provincial governments, because what I've noticed is that they tend to hide behind the councillors when there's no delivery. Yet the competence of the of a particular, like water, belongs to national departments. So we will have to educate each other. So, but more importantly, the communities must be taught that whenever somebody comes and says he's bringing a development, they must be the eyes and ears, so that if they are digging a trench and they employ people, they make sure that they are not exploited. And if they are to build a school, they must check that this school, somebody is here from the Department of Public Works or Education to monitor the work there that has been done there. So it's time that we must all be hands-on. It's not going to be an issue of one-party dominance. But one-party dominance, we have seen it. It breeds corruption.
That indeed is true. Thank you so much for your time, Bantu Holomisa. This was quite an interesting session. We still have a whole lot of questions. We still have people who want to talk about CODESA, people who still want to talk about the Constitution.
Tell them that CODESA, if we had won militarily or even control 1 square inch, the only liberated zone in South Africa was Transkei under the military government of Transkei. The rest, we were free here. That's why we trained in Transkei and also trained them outside. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. Yes. No, we still have a lot of questions. Maybe some of them will even get hold of you on social media and inbox you, because yeah, it's crazy on the comment section. But once again, on everyone, behalf of everyone watching this, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for taking our questions and answering them. Thank you. I really don't have much more to say. And may you continue doing the good work. May UDM grow. May you also, as an individual, continue playing a role in ensuring that our country becomes a better country. As a young person myself, thank you so much for the role that you have played. I hope that some of the ideologies that you have are implemented sooner rather than later, especially when it comes to young people being developed into politics and playing roles of leadership in the country. I believe we need that. Thank you once again. I will hand over back to Umfundisi, who will just wrap up for us and pray for us. For everyone else watching this, join us again tomorrow at 6. We will have yet another interesting topic and we will engage each other. I know that you guys still have a lot of questions, a lot of comments, but yeah, I'll get them more for now. Thank you so much, Tata. Back to you, Tata Mfundisi.
Siyabulela kakhulu Palisa, siyabulela ku-General, and to all the viewers at home and the panel that is with us. We thank God for this session. Come, let's close it in prayer, masithandaze. Sinikela kuwe ke somandla lonke udumo, amandla, ubukhosi nobungcwalisi. Sibulela Nkosi ukuba noThixo nguwe ongajikiyo. Ubunguwe Nkosi izolo, ilizwe lonakele. Ibinguwe Nkosi izolo, abantu becinezelwe. Waba nguThixo Nkosi isikhululekile. Iyawuqhubeka Nkosi ube nguThixo kude ube ngunaphakade. We thank you, Lord, ngezicaka zakho ezinjengoGeneral Bantu Holomisa nabo bonke Nkosi abanalo belwela Nkosi inkululeko yabantu bethu abamnyama. Phinda ke Nkosi isicaka sakho usomeleze, usinike amandla, usikhuthaze Nkosi singalweli nje kuphela abathile, kodwa bonke abantu bazive bekhululekile, bonwabile. Sikelela ke Nkosi emakhayeni ethu sonke, usithamsanise. Xa silala namhlanje silale Nkosi ubuthongo bomntu. Abagulayo Nkosi sibabeka phambi kwakho, abaxakekileyo sibasondeza kuwe, abaselusizini nabafayo bonke Nkosi sibabeka ezukweni lakho, ubangcwalise, ubomeleze, ubaphilise. Uthi ekugqibeleni kwako konke uxolo lukaThixo olugqitha konke ukuqonda lugcine inhliziyo neengqiqo zethu ekuthandeni nasekwazini uThixo. Intsikelelo lukaThixo onamandla onke, uYise, uNyana noMoya Oyingcwele ihlale iphumle kuthi sonke nasemakhayeni ethu kusukela ngoku naphakade.
Yabulela mhlekazi. Lale kahle.
Nkosi Dade.